Okay, the first question that I think would go through anyone's head in terms of diagnosis is, what is Turner syndrome? I mean, you get given this diagnosis and it's like, right, here's the facts, go away and come back with any questions. And I think you don't take on a lot of what they're saying at the time because it is a shock. And I think when you hear a diagnosis of any illness, it's adjustment that you have to make within yourself and a billion questions going through your head as a parent as to how it's going to affect the child in general. And I think that's something you have to go through. Turner's is broken down just a genetic condition. It's not inherited. It's not something that can be changed, where a chromosome is missing from either one or all of the sets of chromosomes that you have to make you as a person. Generally, it only affects girls because it's an X chromosome missing from one, missing from a few, or all of the different chromosomes. That in turn means that the growth development of that girl is affected and they cannot generally grow without a bit of assistance in terms of growth hormone. There can be other symptoms and things that run alongside it, like not having kids, which isn't everyone, but it's because they lack ovaries generally. They can carry but can't have kids. That would be individual because some people, depending on how many chromosomes and things are missing and how badly they're affected, can change from person to person. And, it's something that's unique to them. Short stature, puffy hands and feet is something that doesn't generally affect at all other than at birth. You've got your web neck, so if you can see, it's quite a wide neck here compared to everyone else. You can't see it on my fingernails, but the main fingernails, so your index fingers generally here, are square rather than round at the end. Your feet, the one next to your small toe, so that one is sometimes either smaller or equal to your small toe. There's loads of things that can kind of be minor things I would call as characteristics to Turners. As an essence, that is what Turners is involved in. Another one of the questions that came up was, what is Mosaic Turners and what's classic? What's the difference? And looking at it, there's actually three different types that you can get, one of which is the mosaic. So that is where only part of the chromosomes are missing rather than the whole thing. And I would interpret that myself because it doesn't actually say how that evolves. But I would interpret that myself being missing partially rather than fully, that depending on what bit's missing depends on how you're affected. Um, Classic would be where all of the chromosome is missing. So you would have all of the symptoms and be kind of more affected by Turner's itself because the whole chromosome is missing. So you would have the classic symptoms of Turner's and have all of the effects from it, like not being able to have kids. You can also get one where there is a defected chromosome. So rather than be missing or whatever, it's defected. And I would imagine that, to me, that would be where you get the different underlying conditions because some of the chromosomes are going wrong and not developing as they should. So that's when you get your further problems. So I hope that makes some sense. And there is that vague difference. There's either fully, partially missing, or defected. The swelling from the hands and feet is just the build-up of fluid that's not being absorbed into the body properly, and that will go down like almost as soon as they're born, really. In terms of treatment, I've touched on that a little bit, but the main thing that we would have is growth hormone, generally started pretty early depending on when you're diagnosed. That carries on until you don't actually have any response to the treatment anymore. I carried on till I was about 14, 16 years old, stopped growing with the growth hormone, and my height's gonna be at the maximum level, and it wasn't gonna get any different from what it was. during that time, 13, 14, they'd look at starting on estrogen just to help with development. It helps the bones because you can be prone to a bit more fragile, not as strong bones. So generally, they kind of give you that replacement to help with things like that that you would lack and make you function in any normal society as people would expect you to. You know, you go through all the normal phases of development and things as a teenager because of that medication. Other than that, you could have like your heart and kidney medicines if there are problems with that. Each brand and treatment that they give is all completely different and tailored to you. They monitor the medicine that you're on just to make sure that obviously the effects that you want them to have are happening and that you don't need it adjusted because it doesn't suit you as a person. I've had so many different hormone replacements and things like that to get the right one. The estrogen can go into a couple of different forms. It can go into like a combined pill where it has a few different hormones that will be something that helps you what your body normally would be receiving. Or it could go onto a hormone replacement, which is something that they give as like a menopausal thing, so for the older women. But if the combined pills do not really suit, then they can change it as and when it's needed. It would just probably need a little bit more monitoring to make sure that obviously it is having effects and things that it needs to be having and not actually having something that your body doesn't agree with. In terms of what to expect with Turners, the main thing would be your hospital visits every 6 months just to get checked up. During them hospital visits, they occasionally do scans like bone density scans, ultrasound scans on your kidneys, blood works for any checks for any abnormalities, things like that, that just kind of make sure that there's no complications going on and that nothing's missed in terms of your health to make sure that obviously they can then keep on top of that if there was any concern. But other than that, generally there's not much else to expect. I mean, it is tough living with anyone, so generally I know that there's some daily struggles that parents have, just things like eating, which they can struggle with, which is more the fact that the textures of the food isn't something that we particularly like, and we have to kind of learn to get used to. But generally, you know, it's like having any other child. Even having a normal child isn't the easiest job in the world. It's just something that you learn to get used to, and you're gonna eventually find that the characters that they come out with are just something that you really learn to appreciate. And once you do get to know their character and get to know them, as with anyone, it's part of life and it's a learning curve for anyone and everyone around. Turnus doesn't have any effect on your life day to day, really. The only difference being that you have to take the medications that they give you, generally like your growth hormone and your estrogen daily, but that's once a day in the morning or evening, and you don't have any difference other than that from your routine. And most people without Turners can have different medications that they take. The only other difference is that you're short, and that again could be any number of us that don't even have Turners that have kind of struggles of being short and having to climb up onto the cupboards of the kitchen or grab stools, grab people around your house, your friends, relatives that are taller to reach things at the top of the cupboard, or if you go on a flight for a long haul trying to get the overhead luggage. But generally it has no effect day to day on anything you do. It doesn't restrict, it doesn't stop you doing anything. Turners itself has no impact, like the only thing it affects is the not being able to grow. You know, if it does have any other impact, it's generally because it's got something else like autism or heart and kidney problems, which are as a result of Turner's and something that runs alongside it, but it's not Turner's itself. Girls with Turner's can live a completely normal life. They can go through school, college, university, they get jobs, they can live like everyone else would with no effect, absolutely no problems in a normal society. I mean, even autistic children and the ones that have that spectrum of autism are to some degree now allowed in the mainstream schools, so there's nothing that holds them back. I mean, there's no difference outwardly that you would notice. Most people that I live around and know wouldn't even have a clue that there's anything wrong with me and have just thought that either I'm short or not even any notice of the fact that I'm short. They just think that I'm like everyone else that they see in everyday life. In terms of whether to expect any mental or physical handicaps, generally physically is the short stature. I mean, that is the biggest handicap in terms of that you can get, because obviously it's hard to reach things high up, or it's hard to be able to do as many steps as they would in one go with a stride because their legs are longer than me. I always go on about that to my family and friends. Physically, other than the height, there's not that much difference that you can expect, and they're not handicapped as such. Mentally, it is explained in the books that some people with Turners can be mentally slower than other people, and that they are held back and don't always have as good a quality of life as everyone else. And I think that to me is a big myth that needs to be disintegrated to some degree, because although that can be a part of Turners, if you have a child that does come under the autistic spectrum, that some of us can come under, and if you get some of the underlying conditions that can be a bit more severe that run with Turner's as something completely separate, it can happen, but Turner's itself, physically and mentally, there isn't really that much difference. I mean, we struggle a little bit in maths and need a little bit more support here and there from the people around. I mean, I was fortunate enough with the subjects like maths that I struggled with to find a friend that did understand the topics that I didn't, and I understood the topics that they didn't. So we used to help each other out with that, and I think that is generally kind of what I found. I just needed someone that broke it down into a way that I'd understand, and never held me back. I've always got the grades that I needed, and I've always managed to get through. I've gone straight through to university from school, and a lot of the girls that I know with Turners have had some sort of school, college, university route that they've followed, or they've got themselves into work with the grades from school that they need, and got themselves onto courses to get a job in the area that they want, but they've never been held back in any shape or form mentally with that. Even socially, most of the girls with Turners are extremely sociable people, and it's more of a group scenario that I find that they struggle with that. One on one, I'm pretty good. If I've got people that I'm comfortable with, that I know, even people that I don't, I can talk forever. Most of my family always comment on the fact that I talk loads, and sometimes far too much for them, because I'm always wanting to not have a silence. But it's more kind of when I'm with a big group of people, a lot of people I don't know, that I then am a bit more reserved, but it's more kind of trying to work out the dynamics of the group and understand the way people work and kind of fit in my own personality and take on things, rather than I'm struggling. It's just working through what to do in that scenario myself before I approach it. In terms of looking different, I mean, every person in this life looks individual. That is the best thing about life, is being unique and being something that someone else isn't, having ideals and characteristics that other people don't have. Turner's girls do have certain characteristics, certain like traits that if you were around that, any parent that has a girl with Turners or any Turners girls would recognize. I would be able to pick a girl out in the crowd and know that they have Turners without even having to ask because I can see it. I just know what characteristics in myself and other people that have it that I talk to have. It's not something that you can explain to someone that hasn't lived with a Turner's girl for any length of time. It's just something that you grow used to in terms of the way they act and the way they behave. But generally, you wouldn't know any different to anyone that is in the street. It's something that you don't pick up on and it's something that you don't even notice. I mean, most people that I've spoken to, because I'm so open and tell about Turners, have turned around to me and said that they wouldn't have picked anything out in terms of being wrong with me or anything different to anyone else. They'd always just assume that maybe I'm slightly shorter than a lot of people, but never anything wrong with me at all. So if you speak to any one of your friends, they would probably say exactly the same. There would be no telltale signs that would tell them something's wrong with a Chinese girl that doesn't have any of the other underlying conditions that can run alongside it. Turner's pretty much is an easily manageable thing. The main thing you'd have is your daily medications, so estrogen and your growth hormone, which both replace the things that you lack. Other than that, we usually go every 6 months for a checkup when we're younger, just to make sure that there's no complications that are coming up from Turner's and follow up just the patterns, check your growth and height, just get a rough idea of what's going on for you because it is so individual with any illness. And the other thing that we then do is yearly checkups as an adult. I mean, it gets less and less as long as you've got no other problems. If you have other problems, obviously you'd have your regular checks for your ear, nose, and throat, or your heart, kidneys, which would be monitored as you go along. And you see loads of people in that process if you need to. But generally, it's so minimal that you're never admitted. Like all of the heart and kidney checks would be outpatients. Any of the monitoring for every 6 months is an outpatient clinic. So you're never in there very long. Turner's itself never has anything that's life threatening in itself. I mean, generally, there's other conditions that run alongside it or as a result of having Turner's, like your heart and kidneys, autism, anything like that that I've already mentioned. But it's never life threatening on its own. If there are any problems and complications that have come in pregnancies at early stages or anything like that that you hear about, it's generally because of something else that has gone on, and it's something that's more serious than just Turner's because Turner's on its own isn't something that really has that much effect to anyone that has it. As I say, it's more that there's something else going on. With how sick a Turner's girl can be, Turner's itself as a diagnosis doesn't mean that they're gonna be sick the whole of their lives and have any problems at all. I mean, it's something that's so completely manageable, something that you live at home, you live a normal life like everyone else. It's something you wouldn't even know most girls have. It can have complications like heart conditions and problems, kidney problems, thyroid problems, diabetes, things that would possibly affect your life to some degree, but still stuff that is manageable and still stuff that can be controlled and kept at bay at home and not affect your life, other than a morning or an evening where you have to have a dose of something to keep on top of that. But Turners itself will never ever mean that the child is going to be sick or have any other difference to any other child that you may have that doesn't have Turners. In terms of how to help your Turner's child deal with having Turner syndrome, I know from my own experience that my parents have never ever brought me up as seeing myself as something different to everyone else. They've always got me to embrace having Turner's and embrace the fact that I have a condition, but it's only a small part of me. They've always allowed me to go out with friends and to go to school and college and encourage me to have my own independence and embrace, the type of person that I become as you would with any child. It's nothing that they've made me stop living my life. They've always helped me to get where I want to be. Friends have always been really, really good. I've always explained what Turner's is and what it means about me and help them understand the way I am having Turner's, because you find like a lot of the girls can be organised. They like to know the details of anything they do. They like to know when the times that they're doing a certain task, or they like to know what they're doing entails so that they can understand it. And I think once they've understood what's involved in the activity that they're doing, and once they're there and they can see it and they're in that particular scenario, they deal with it as anyone else would. They just like to plan ahead and get a better understanding before they do anything. And my friends understand that about me and they appreciate that about me. I'm a pretty honest character, like I have no filter in terms of what I come out with to my friends. I will always just be honest about how I feel with a situation. If I don't like something, I'll tell them. And they appreciate that side of me because they like the fact that I can be so upfront and tell them how I feel. And they've never ever treated me any different. They always just treat me as they would anyone else in my group and circle, and they've always encouraged me to be who I am. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons, as I was saying before with the parents, to just embrace the person that that particular child is and help them be that person. Every Turner's girl I know is such an ambitious character. They're so strong, they're so keen to experience life, and they're so keen to just get out there and achieve the goals that they set for themselves in life. And they always set themselves the goal of doing something and not being held back. And I think if you work alongside them and you encourage them, you provide them support, you're there when they need advice and you're there when they need a bit of guidance because they don't understand something, or to break it down differently because you know how they are as a person. That is the biggest thing you can do for them, is just be there as a support network. And it helps no end to have that, because I always know that the people in my life are around me no matter what happens, and that I can always turn to them. And you know, that just makes a huge difference. The other thing I would suggest in terms of supporting the Turner's girl later on in life is really encouraging the group situation of getting into the Facebook groups that they have for Turners and the support societies, maybe attending some conferences and things like that, because out of everything, to me, having girls with Turners that I've met, to know that I'm not the only one that has Turners and has all of the issues that have gone on in my life, from being short and from feeling different, having it a little bit. I've overcome that from being able to meet these people and have that support. And it's always nice to be able to see what the older tennis girls have gone through, how they've approached things, what to expect, because obviously they'll then be at a different stage to what you're at in terms of their treatment. They've all had their own different experiences of having Turners, and I think the biggest support is being able to talk to someone that truly is going through it. And I think it really does help, because most of the girls find that other girls with Turners will just understand them completely, where they feel that other family and friends that don't have Turners wouldn't be able to necessarily. Not because they don't try, but just because it is something that, and unless you have it, you don't always appreciate what the challenges can be for them. And I think just being able to speak to someone, we all speak to each other without any judgment or criticism. And I think even without explanation, sometimes we would really know what the girl is talking about with that topic. The other thing I got sent through was a question that you probably would ask yourself. It is something I guess would come through, is what did I do wrong and why is it happening to me in terms of my child having Turners? And I think nothing you've done is something wrong necessarily. Like, you can't decide who has it at the end of the day. It's something that comes up. It's not a pattern or anything that can be changed, or anything that you do is just part of life. And I think, to me personally, the only way I look at something like that would be that you would never be handed something in life more than you can handle. And I think that to me is so, so true. And I think there's something there that A, you can learn from, and B, the child that you have can learn from. There's something that they can bring to you and you can bring to them. That's why I'm driving so hard on getting that awareness out there, is because, to me personally, I have totally embraced having Turners. And I think to do something like raise awareness and actually really make a conscious effort to raise the bar and raise what we do to get that awareness out there is amazing. And if it's something I can do and do well, then I'm going to go for it. I always believe that everything in life that you're handed is a learning curve, and everything in life is something that's intended for you and that you need to go through as a person. So it's not necessarily anything that you've done wrong, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just change the way you look at it and look at it as something positive, something you can learn from and something you can take from life. In terms of how do I explain Turners to your child, you don't take on more than you can understand and than you can manage. And I think always be upfront and honest, and encourage them to embrace it rather than be something that they don't like about themselves and letting themselves be anything but normal. Just help them to understand it and go through it with them as and when the issues come up, really. In the future, I mean, there are complications in terms of they may need the odd little bit of support in studying, and they may need just a bit of encouragement and support, but at the end of the day, generally every child could need that. And I think, like, as long as you're there and you listen and you take the time to work through whatever it is and show them how to deal with it. If they're not sure and you've dealt with it, go through it with them and be like, look, this is the way to approach it. Break it down in a way that's manageable for them and understandable, and just getting them the support network and being there to listen, I think, is the main thing. There's always going to be the main issue of them finding different stages, like seeing their friends get married, seeing their friends get kids come along. That sort of thing just needs support, and I think that's the main complication I've found, helping them appreciate and understand the illness as it comes up, any issues that they have, like having to start a new med or anything like that is going to be scary. So being there to help them understand it. When do you tell them that they're not going to be able to have children is something that's unique and individual to everyone. I've always been given like the books to look through about Turners and been able to get my own understanding of it. And I think I've been aware from reading that all along that I couldn't have kids. And I think my parents have always been honest throughout with absolutely everything, really. They've always told me how it is, and I think the hospital appointments and things that I had gave me that basis to understand it as well, because they always run tests to confirm or deny what they suspect. And I think I found out from when I was 7 it was that I couldn't have kids, and it hurts, but I've always grown up knowing that, and I think it made it easier knowing from the start. The way I look at not being able to have kids that is not that I can't have kids full stop, it's that I can't have it without that little bit of extra help, and it's also not being able to have it in my own time frame, but that can happen to anyone. You just have to approach it like that and just broach it as it comes up. I always think that I can have kids, it's just I'm going to need that help. So I'm in contact with the people that can get me to that stage, and as and when I need to and want to think about that, then I can. And there's loads of different options, and the technology now is so advanced that it may not even be an issue soon. The next and final thing is, what do we do now? And to me, the only logical answer to that would be, you've got the diagnosis, live your life at the end of the day. Make both yours and your child's life as normal, happy, and the best that it can be. Like, don't let it hold anything back, and don't let it change anything. At the end of the day, it's your life, and live it the way you want. Treat things the way you want to treat it, and take from it what you will. Just make the most of the opportunities that you've been given, and take the positives from it. Every situation in life, just take a positive. I want to also shout a huge thank you to everyone who sent in questions and given me feedback and help to get the video to be up and running, and a direction for it, because I really did want to get it out there for everyone, and I wanted to do something for the awareness. So yeah, it would be a huge help that you've given me that opportunity.